remember you and me used to spend the whole goddamn day in bed listening to Columbia House Party. Jake, imagine that opening line in a fake British accent and without the grammatical error. It's not a bad opener.
It's not bad. It's not bad. It's definitely of a time.
I can't do a fake British accent. I mean, I'm sure I could.
But you don't want to on a show.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to sing with one.
Yeah. It's definitely, this is going to be I think of all the episodes we've done, this is going to be the most rooted in time, let's say, so far.
Also, the first time we've run into a bit of a jerk.
Yeah, like we've
allegedly.
We've done a lot of maybe some problematic lyrics. We've got to do a allegedly semi-problematic person.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about preparing for this episode was, you obviously do a first sweep of a Wikipedia page. I look at old Billboard magazines, interviews, YouTubes, whatever. This is the first time I've had to read multiple court documents to prepare for an episode.
If that doesn't tee it up, I don't know what does.
Robin, when we talked about Body Talk, we mentioned that Robin Is Here was her first album to really break through in Canada and the US. One of these songs, Do You Know What It Takes, debuted on the MuchMusic Countdown on June 6, 1997, the same week that Semi-Charmed Life by Third Eye Blind debuted on the countdown. Robin reached number 1. Semi-Charmed Life did not. Somehow, despite...
That's amazing to me. Like, it was so ubiquitous when it came out.
Yes. It stayed on the countdown from June 6th until August 22nd, Semi-Charmed Life.
Wow.
You're talking 10 weeks of summer.
That's the whole summer for the countdown.
Basically. Looking back on those MuchMusic, I mentioned before that there's a database of, I think from like late 96 to like early 2000 of what was on the MuchMusic Countdown. It's crazy to remember that that's how we got new music and consumed new music. And like, imagine something not debuting in the top 5 on a list now and actually having success. Like, if you don't debut right at the top, you're toast.
Totally. And like, I was talking, God, I don't remember because my brain's melted, about like the experience of going to MuchMusic for discovering, like, so much of my music discovery is because first when I was like in this era, be Countdown, then we got older, it was like the punk show and Much Loud. And like, I do as great it is that everything's at our fingertips now and everything's on streaming and you can just, any band you hear of in the world now, you can just type it in and you find it. There is a quaintness to like what's coming on TV next. And is this going to be my new favorite band? Because you didn't know. You didn't. Anytime you could discover your new favorite band.
Yeah, it was similar to walking in and seeing the HMV Top 20, and if there was one you hadn't heard, you just pop it in the CD tester.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'll give Econoline Crush a spin. Econoline Crush was all over the MuchMusic Countdowns in 97 and 98.
You don't know what it's like.
Yeah, you want to talk about a period album.
Oh, man.
Obviously, debuting high on the charts is important now. That's why you should like, rate, subscribe to Columbia House Party on all the places.
We love the charts.
You get
Make this go platinum.
Yeah, 6 times platinum, maybe.
Maybe.
If we are as lucky as Third Eye Blind. Okay, the album we're discussing today fits right in with this kind of nostalgia of the late 90s, for better or for worse. Often confused as a one-hit wonder or at least a one-moment wonder, this album and the band itself have been quite successful thanks to sugary pop rock coding of some pretty difficult content, an A-side full of earworms in this case, and heavy crossover appeal, a lot of soundtrack appearances and things like that. Today, we're discussing Third Eye Blind's self-titled debut.
She lives for me, says she lives for me, ovation. Who won't motivation? She comes round and she goes down on me, and I make you smile like a drug for you. Do ever what you wanna do, coming over you. Keep on smiling what we go through. One stop to the rhythm that divides you, and I speak to you like the chorus to the verse. Drop another line like a coda with the curse. Coming like a freak show takes the stage. We give them the game she plays. She say I want something else to get me through this semi-time kind of life. Baby, baby, I want something else. I'm not listening when you say goodbye.
roughly in our age range, by choice or not, that song is somewhere in their top 25 of like songs I've heard the most in my life.
For sure. Oh man. And it's like, it's so, that song and this album, the sound, it's not that it's dated, but it's just, I was listening to it yesterday walking around downtown, and you just feel like you're in the establishing shot of a 90s teen movie when you listen to this album. I just feel like it should be a crane shot of a college campus as every song on this album plays.
Yep. Yep, it sure does. The reason I brought this album today.
You love this album.
I love this album. It's one of my all-time favorite albums. Third Eye Blind's place, I think, in the kind of late 90s alt-rock boom gets lost a little bit. It's so...
For a band so successful, they
so
are
successful.
sort of... Would you say...
And still going.
Would you say that Third Eye Blind is to you what Harvey Danger is to me?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty close. I like Harvey Danger too, but not to the degree that you like
right,
Harvey
like,
Danger.
But that 90s one-hit wonder band that you just like go to bat for no matter what. Yeah.
Absolutely. I will defend this album, as I'm probably going to have to over the course of this hour. It's strange to see how Third Eye Blind is treated now. Obviously, the fact that they're still going on. There's been some drama with Third Eye Blind over the years. But I feel like a lot of people think of them as, first of all, a one-hit wonder based on Semi-Charmed Life. But then if they're reminded that, hey, they had multiple big singles.
There's like 5 major hits on this album.
There are 5 singles. 4 of them are like definable, immediately recognizable tunes. And somehow I think that like they're like a 4-hit in 1-hit wonder.
Yeah.
It's weird. People sleep.
So my Third Eye Blind story that I'll tell quickly before we get into the album, just because I think it speaks to exactly this point, was I've seen them live once. They played Saturday afternoon at Way Home 2016. For some reason, whoever was scheduling the bands gave Third Eye Blind an hour and a half slot. I'm still not sure why. They just released a new album. They played mostly the new album. Everyone there just wanted like the 5 singles, which they did play, but they dispersed them throughout this. Like they didn't open with I think they opened with like Graduate or something, but it was such a bizarre time slot for them. So it was the middle of the day. It was so hot. No one slept for like 2 days.
That's getting 90 minutes in the middle of the afternoon is tough. Like
so M83 played after them and got less time. And they were on the main stage. It was bizarre. It was so bizarre. They milked it as much as they could, but it was one of those things where everyone there was clearly just like, it was like, when are they going to get to the fireworks factory about Semi-Charmed Life? But then they just kept pulling out like song after song that everyone also knew, but maybe forgot that they knew. Like there was so many songs where I was like, oh yeah, this is also Third Eye Blind.
Yeah, I was listening to the album as I got ready this week, and Spotify, as it does sometimes, will just, once the album's over, will just play you something else. And it just kept playing Third Eye Blind songs. And I'm a Third Eye Blind fan.
Of course.
So I knew them, but like, it's like, oh yeah, they did have that single where he talks about going down on someone for an hour.
And it was like
one
of the biggest songs of the 90s.
Yeah, I think this album too, for me, and it came out in 1997, it was a nice bellwether for where my tastes were going to go as an early teen. Obviously, there's more on the pop rock side here. The second half of the album, which we'll dissect a little bit more, is kind of like pre-emo. One of the funniest parts of preparing for this was the r/emo subreddit. As I came across multiple posts about Third Eye Blind within this subreddit, and I'm not sure if it was the same moderator every time, slowly descending into madness.
One guy loves Third Eye Blind?
No, but there was one guy taking them all down and being mad that like, how could you post Third Eye Blind in this emo subreddit? And that's actually something that comes up fairly often with this album. Is I don't think anyone would classify it as emo. Like a couple of the tracks on the second half are emo tracks.
Yeah.
But this is a pretty standard alternative rock album.
Yeah, they're definitely a band that alternative is especially like late 90s alternative. This is like, this sits alongside comfortably for me, like the Gin Blossoms and that kind of stuff, which like Gin Blossoms kick ass.
Yeah.
Hey Jealousy's a great song, but that's where like they're like Goo Goo Dolls, Gin Blossoms world to me, if a little more interesting.
not according to some users on r/emo. So anyway, this one moderator just like, and I don't know if I even looked at the posts in the right order, but it seemed the way I came across them, it was like he was just descending more and more into why is everyone keep posting Third Eye Blind on my emo subreddit? But it does come up sometimes. You see them when, obviously the last 5 years or so, there have been a lot of retrospectives on the last 15 or 20 years and the pop punk and emo explosions and things like that. Third Eye Blind comes up sometimes. I was reading a 2017 piece from Gia Tolentino, whose new book of essays, Trick Mirror, is fantastic. If you haven't checked it out yet, one of my favorite books that I read this year. She wrote an essay about going to the second anniversary of Emo Night in LA in 2017. And one of her comments was like, yeah, I brought a friend who's like not a part of the scene. And like he's getting to hear tracks that he knows and didn't realize would be at an Emo Night, like Third Eye Blind. It's like, yeah, because you wouldn't play a Third Eye Blind track at an emo night, but if it's really more of just a late 90s, early 2000s nostalgia night, then it fits right in. It fits in extremely well.
Yeah, it's true. Like I know you and I both have, let's say we've both logged minutes upstairs at Sneaky D's in our lives.
Stayed downstairs last night.
But like that scene in air quotes, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not so much, and I think genres have sort of bled together into this now. It's not so much emo and alternative. It's now late 90s, early 2000s nostalgia. And Third Eye Blind is, or if not Third Eye Blind, Semi-Charmed Life is 100%. It like you put that on in a DJ mix right beside, like you said, like right beside Fall Out Boy, and no one's going to bat an eye.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, okay.
It's also cool to go back to an album that, you listen to as not a kid, but like a early teen or preteen, and realize that you really enjoyed it then, but had no idea what it was talking about. The amount of drug and sex content on here was fun to go back and explore. I mean, I've listened to this album fairly regularly over time, but yeah, when you really dig in on the lyrics, it's like, oh yeah, 13-year-old me had no idea. 12-year-old me had no idea, whatever age I was when this came out.
It does feel like an album where Stephan Jenkins is just kind of like, what can I get away with and still sell millions of records?
I also thought for the longest time they were British.
Really?
Here's a quote from Stephan Jenkins in The Observer in 2017. I think I've always been punk, not in the sense that I play 3 chords or have a fake British accent, although I do have a fake British accent. It's more the sense of a willingness to be provocative in support of my stance. So at least he admits it. This is, there are songs that reference London. There are songs that reference Chelsea. I didn't realize at the time that Chelsea was also a New York neighborhood, but his admitted fake British accent, I can't be blamed for thinking he was British as a teenager.
I'm definitely going to, before we dive too deep into this, I feel we both need to make it clear that Stephan Jenkins fucking sucks.
We are going to make it clear by the end of this episode.
But is also, he simultaneously sucks as like a person, but is one of the most, maybe not intentionally, but ridiculously entertaining people.
Oh, his interviews?
When at that Way Home show, it's 5 p.m. It's so hot. Everyone's tired, just waiting for headliners. He was like preaching to the crowd. He told everyone to find someone that you don't know and put your hand on their shoulder and let's all make a connection. And I'm like, you're Third Eye Blind. Play Jumper.
Also at that point, he's like almost 50.
Yeah.
Which I guess maybe it makes more
he
sense.
He was not dressed like a 50-year-old. I'll tell you that much.
Certainly not. He, some of his interviews now are pretty entertaining.
The Jim Morrison of our time.
Back at the time in the mid 90s, Third Eye Blind was basically a brand new band at this point. Stephan Jenkins and Kevin Cadigan were introduced to each other through producer Mark Hensley and some other mutual friends. They began to produce some demos together, including some demos that would go on to be some of their biggest hits. Jenkins, at this point in his life, growing up in the San Fran area, had some hip hop and jazz influences. He wanted to put some funk in his delivery. You listen to some of these tracks, you can feel the hip hop like cadence to the way he's delivering lines, especially when he gets into kind of almost the spoken word verses, which Semi-Charmed Life was actually originally he was going to speak the verses. And I don't know if that was going to be like a Nada Surf kind of speak the verses.
Oh, weird.
But it was like very much, it still kind of sounds spoken word-y, but it was spoken word initially. Cadigan played the guitar while Jenkins sang. Songwriting was collaborative and heavy on brainstorming. A lot of it was Cadigan would riff and Jenkins would write lyrics about how the riff made him feel. There's been trying to figure out exactly what that process was like has been difficult because They disagree on some of the finer points, and the story has been contentious over time. What Jenkins' idea for the sound was Edie Brickell meets Suicidal Tendencies, which is certainly one way to frame what you want your sound to be. They had 2 demos as the 2 of them. RCA helped fund a 3rd demo with producer Eric Valentine. It got them some major label attention. And then, as Jenkins told the San Francisco Gate in 1996, quote, "We decided we were really great." This is what Third Eye Blind sounded like at that point.
To get me through this life, baby, I want something else. Not listening when you say goodbye.
Clearly some cleaning up to do there. But
That's like not the vocals, but that sounds literally like Mouse Rat from Parks and Rec. For a second, I was waiting for Chris Pratt to come with that. Oh yeah, that's what that sounded like to me.
That demo and a couple others like it led to a showcase for record executives in 1996. At this point, when Third Eye Blind would play shows in the San Fran area, they would have a piñata at their shows, and at some point they would bust it open and there'd be candy for the crowd. At this particular show with record execs on hand, they had a sad clown piñata, and when it busted open, it was filled with live crickets.
What?
Yep. So early on, Third Eye Blind is getting a reputation as snotty. They're getting reputation as kind of teases at this point because they'd met with record executives a lot, and RCA had helped fund a demo, and they were still not signing, and the live crickets was the cherry on top. They get even bolder than releasing live crickets on record execs. They met with Dave Massey, who had signed Oasis. Oasis had a show coming up in San Francisco. Massey at one point asked them, "When's your next show?" And Jenkins joked and said the date of the Oasis show and said, "Put us on the bill with them." Massey called their bluff and did it. This unsigned band is going to open for Oasis. They don't have a record yet. They're opening for fucking Oasis at the San Francisco Civic Auditorium. Allegedly, according to the newspaper articles out of this show, they also got an encore. They were so good opening for Oasis that they came back out for another song. I have trouble picturing that.
I mean, everything that we've learned about Third Eye Blind and Stephan Jenkins strikes me that they did an encore. Whether or not the encore was asked for is another question.
Oasis, you won't believe, not huge fans of Third Eye Blind. This part of the Third Eye Blind lore comes in early. Kevin Cadigan recalled at one point that he crumpled up like a soda can and threw it toward a garbage that missed. Liam Gallagher was in that vicinity and said, "You better watch it. Like, you threw a can at me. You're lucky you didn't get stabbed." I'm not quoting there, I'm paraphrasing. Liam Gallagher also told them, and quote, "You guys are shite. You'll never make it." Despite all of this, despite the live crickets, despite Liam Gallagher not being an early adopter of Third Eye Blind, all of this buzz and their performance and opening for Oasis led to a bit of a bidding war. They eventually signed with Elektra. They cited the artistic freedom that Elektra was going to provide them, but at the time it was reported to be the largest publishing deal ever for an unsigned artist. That was probably the real reason they signed with Elektra. They had 14 demo tracks at that point. We heard one of them. Obviously, it needed a little bit of cleaning up. The record label had some input on, what some of those songs might sound like. So mostly the recording process was just refining their demos and re-recording them. The self-titled album by Third Eye Blind ended up sounding like this. All right, so the self-titled album comes out. It's an album that's obviously very heavy on sex, drugs, and the come down. There's a lot of talk of coke. There's a lot of talk of crystal method. Stephan Jenkins himself has played it coy over time as to whether he was actually a big user of drugs. At times he's denied it. At times he said it didn't matter. It's unclear if he was. He was a kid who grew up in the San Fran area, but his family, he had kind of lamented being one of the poorer people in a very rich neighborhood. I don't know where that plays in, but he's never given a straight answer on whether he was writing to someone else's experience of what he was observing or whether these were his own experiences.
I think Stephan Jenkins was high on Stephan Jenkins.
Might have been. That's a hard come down. The album was really strong. I know we differ on how strong it still holds up. 5 of the first 6 songs on the album were singles, and like 4 of those were big singles. What did they hold up? Like, do you still like those songs?
Yeah,
listen to them
I
back
think
now?
so. I think that that Way Home show I don't think the crowd at that show was incorrect. Like the 4 or 5 big hits from this album, to me, so just a little background for everyone. I haven't listened to this album front to back in, I don't know, 15 years maybe. And it's, I think like How's It Gonna Be, Semi-Charmed Life, Jumper, Motorcycle Drive-By, Graduate, like those songs are, especially Graduate. Graduate's an amazing song.
Awesome.
But like, they still hold up, I think. My biggest issue with this album is that my biggest problem with this album, I think, is Stephan Jenkins, because it needs an editor. Like, why is your album 52 minutes long, Stephan Jenkins?
But that was kind of what it was at the time, right?
I guess.
14 tracks. Is that what it is? 14 tracks?
But like, I feel like every song on this album has an extra verse it doesn't need. And I'm including Semi-Charmed Life, which I think is a like pretty perfect pop rock song. And I think that's been accepted as such.
It also got heavily radio edited, and for music videos, they would often cut a verse out to tighten it up a little bit. I have
done it at karaoke before and been very confused as to why the entire verse was missing.
Good karaoke song if you're a semi-decent singer.
Yeah, it's fun.
I'm not. My karaoke range is so limited.
Your karaoke's good though. I like your karaoke.
I gotta just do screamo.
Nothing wrong with that.
It's the only thing I can do. I kind of want to go through this a little, like, we haven't done a like song by song, and I don't want to go too deep on every song, but I find that approach to this album interesting.
I think because they're so fucking long. Like, there's a lot to talk about.
By the way, StephanJenkins.com is a website that still exists. It's a fan page that's like on an old like Angel Fire adjacent page. It's amazing.
I was hoping you were gonna say it laughed, because I was like, we should buy it.
Oh,
we should have StephanJenkins.com links to Columbia House Party.
So there are fans. So I guess fans would like fill in, like, whenever he gave explanations about the songs in media, they would like post it on this site.
Amazing.
The site was impossible to navigate, and I did not trust their annotations, so I had to dig a little deeper. But the one nice thing about producer Dylan has it up now, if you want to get a quick look at what that looks like.
It looks like it should just be side by side with like a Dragon Ball Z GeoCities fan page.
Yeah, or one of my wrestling e-feds. I never did that.
Yeah, no, definitely didn't.
We established on the My Chemical Romance episode that I was popular in high school. We don't need to talk about that I taught myself HTML to have a wrestling site.
That kicks ass. I love that. That's a very Blake thing, and I love it.
Yeah, me spending my free time in high school doing work, and yes. Anyway, Stephan Jenkins has been very forthcoming with the lyrical content over time. So figuring out, not that these songs are particularly deep, even though you don't maybe realize in the moment that they're about sex and drugs and those kind of things, the lyrics are pretty straightforward, and the simplicity kind of makes it fairly accessible. Losing a Whole Year is the opening track. love it. It's one of my favorite songs. I think he said he wrote about a rich girl from Bernal Heights, which is a San Fran neighborhood. It's just such a great, we call them, like Steve and I have talked about them before, we call them cocaine relationships, where a relationship is very intense, very fast.
Yeah.
And it's maybe not the healthiest. And then you look up at the end and it's like, holy shit, it's May?
Yeah. Yeah, I know those well.
Yeah. I've certainly had one of those.
Yeah. I think we all have.
This is a good song about that experience.
This song sort of caught me off guard. I forgot this is how the album opened. For some reason, I knew Semi-Charmed Life wasn't the opening track, but I don't actually know what my brain remembered it as being, but I didn't remember it as being Losing a Whole Year.
Mm-hmm.
And when it kicked in, it's much more for a Third Eye Blind, what you think of a Third Eye Blind album opener to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more subdued than I would have originally thought.
Yeah, it's cool. Bassist Orion Salazar said, and quote, "There are maybe 4 bass guitars at one point in the chorus. I played an 8-strong bass that's doubled, a distorted 4-string run through a rotary speaker." This is a complicated song.
So unnecessary.
For an opener. To your point about needing an editor, pretty good opener though.
It is. No, I like this song a lot. I will say, for a band that, looking back, very much their sound bleeds into the late 90s alt rock radio sound. Like, I don't think there's a lot to Third Eye Blind that's like, oh, that's unique. But there is, in the sense that, like, when you hear a song like Losing a Whole Year, you're just like, oh yeah, that's a Third Eye Blind song.
Yeah, which is good. You got to put a stamp on it like that. Narcolepsy's number 2 song. I like it because he just gets like he does a good job of putting you in the position of like someone. Weirdly, even though it's about narcolepsy, I find it's a very insomniac track where you're just like, you're so tired, you've lost it, you're rambling about nothingness.
Once again, too, it's needing an editor. Narcolepsy
Yes.
does not need that slow first minute 15.
No, just jump right into it.
Yeah, there's no reason for that beginning, that song.
The album then goes into Semi-Charmed Life. This is where we get hit after hit, kind of. It's a massive, massive success. It's clearly about a descent into drug addiction. Jenkins in 1997 told Billboard it is, and quote, "a dirty, flirty song about snorting speed and getting blowjobs. Pulls you down into this mess." He said it was bright and shiny for bright and shiny's sake. It's intended to be what the seductiveness of speed is like.
To your point about your lineup construction theory for
Hitting
albums,
third.
this sits very nicely in the Jose Bautista slot, and there's a reason for that. Like, it's getting. I think the reason I didn't consider Losing a Whole Year to be the opener in my brain is that because from track 3 to like 8, it's just hit after hit. It really is. It's almost like a prologue. Like, it is kind of like, okay, like, these are good songs, but like, let's get to the meat of this stuff now.
So as we mentioned, the radio edit cut out the Crystal Meth stuff at some point. Sometimes they just cut a whole verse and one of the choruses out. The doot 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 riff is, not that it needs explanation, but "Walk on the Wild Side" from Lou Reed. Like, it's clearly lifted from that. It's that song has been, I don't know how to quantify this. I don't know if there's a list out there somewhere, but I would guess it's somewhere up there on the rankings of like most soundtrack appearances.
I think so. If not that song specifically, Third Eye Blind absolutely as a band are.
Yes, their IMDb page is long.
But yeah, like, Semi-Charmed Life is, we sort of talked a little, it's like, it's not obviously as good as something like Dancing on My Own, but it is in the sense of that idea of a song being bigger than an album, even though said album has other great songs and big hits. It's just such an, and like, I will see this many times throughout this show, I'm sure, because so many of these albums we're talking about have these like songs or hits or whatever that are bigger than the band or the album itself. And Semi-Charmed Life, I think, both because of its like timing and its placement in its timing and in its era, and also just how fucking everywhere it was. It's just like, Third Eye Blind will never. And like, I don't think they mind, because clearly they're fine playing all their old hits. They're not a band that says we don't play the old stuff. But like, this is Third Eye Blind. Like, Semi-Charmed Life is that song.
Yeah, you get it.
Band. Yeah,
you get who they are right away.
Exactly.
About a year after Semi-Charmed Life comes out, Jumper is released as a single, which, again, releasing a single a year after the original single is a crazy thing to consider now.
I wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. You could cut ties with all the lies that you've been living in. And if you do not want to see me again, I would understand. I would understand. The angry boy a bit too insane, icing over a secret pain. You know you don't belong. You're the first to fight, you way too loud. You're the flash of light on a burial shroud. I know something's wrong. Well, everyone I know has got a reason to say, put the past away. I wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. I would understand. I wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. I would understand. I wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. And I would understand. I wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. I would understand. I wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. And I would understand.
Jumper is, I think everyone kind of recognizes what that song is about. It's pretty straightforward. At the time, it was written not literally, but the story was Stephan Jenkins was thinking about a gay friend killing themselves because of bullying and the pressures and the difficulty of accepting who you are and other people accepting who you are. In retrospect, he has said it's more about him going through, bullying and his own troubles, being a poor person in a richer neighborhood, his difficulties with ADD and dyslexia. The band originally thought this was a dark song. The reception to that song, how it's been used, how it's kind of turned around, and Jenkins' own observations when they play it at shows has been that the reception to the song has turned it very much into an uplifting song. It's the levity part of their concert sets. It's a release for people. That's kind of cool to think about that. I mean, obviously the tone of the song, he's trying to talk the person down, but I guess the way it was written initially, they thought it was darker because that wasn't going to be effective. And then suddenly people have turned it and used it as, not suddenly, it was 22 years ago, but people turned it and used it almost as a rallying cry and a support mechanism.
Yeah.
Like we've obviously talked a lot about the cult of emo and how those communities sought each other out for help with things like that and pushed the conversation forward. This did not have that dramatic an impact, but it's cool that, it turned out different than they intended, more positively.
And I think it also has that, because of its sound, it is that sing-along 90s alt-rock tune that you hear at a show and you're like, yeah, I'll sing that chorus. I know that chorus. I see why I almost feel like this song never had a chance at being taken as a dark song. It's just not because of the song itself, just because of the music they decided to put to this song sounds like a sing-along at a concert in the late 90s.
They should have flipped it with How's It Gonna Be?
Yep.
How's It Gonna Be? We're skipping ahead a song on the album, but How's It Gonna Be is, a pretty straightforward, I lost this love and you cross paths again and time changes that relationship and it's not the same thing anymore. It sounds darker where Jumper sounds a little more uplifting. This song came about because Cadigan was just messing around with an auto harp and it made Stephan Jenkins feel nostalgic. This, again, back to Cadigan would do cool music stuff and Jenkins would be like, this makes me feel like this. Which seems to me like a pretty good way to write music.
When I was in grade 5, one of our assignments was to read a passage of our choosing set to a song that we felt evoked the mood of said passage from the book. And I don't remember what the book was, but I definitely did it to How It's Gonna Be.
I'm only pretty sure that I can't take anymore before you take a swing. I wonder, what are we fighting for? When I say out loud, I wanna get out of this. I wonder, is there anything I'm gonna miss? I wonder how it's gonna be when you don't know me. How's it gonna be when you're so out?
And then there was a fifth single. Just keeps coming. Graduate, which also makes the soundtrack rounds. It's pretty straightforward. If you were graduating high school, you would just latch onto that. Stephan Jenkins wrote it more about them getting into the music industry and like, hey, we finally made it, but like, can you just let us get on with the music? Meanwhile, hey, they maybe could have cut this album by 8 minutes and you would have been better off for it. Graduate is a pretty good song.
Yeah, again, like it also caught me off guard. Like I knew the song, but I didn't know it was there on the album. And it was just like, oh, this song kind of slaps.
Yeah, it's probably the best rock song on the album.
I think so, yeah. I think actually How It's Gonna Be and Graduate are probably the climax of the album, so to speak. Like that's really where it peaks for me. Like,
okay.
I think How's It Gonna Be is my favorite of the slower tunes on the album, and Graduate's definitely my favorite of the rock tunes on the album.
Can I pass away? Can I pass away? Can I look at faces that I meet? Can I get my punk ass off the street? I'm not waiting here for you to die. When it's all been after we do.
It's also like, I think the most dated sounding song on the album. And I don't mean that as a criticism. It just like no rock is being made in the last 10 years that sounds anything like that.
Yeah, to your earlier point, that song is the one that most fits a teen coming of age movie.
Yeah, I can see
It's
that over the
literally
credits.
like it just could fit any high school song. Like it could have been on the American Pie soundtrack. It could have been on the Can't Hardly Wait soundtrack. It might have been on both of those soundtracks. I don't know. We'll find out. The second half of the album is different. It's not, the first 6 songs are pretty rocky, heavy on singles. 5 of the first 6 songs are singles, everything but Narcolepsy, which is still a pretty good track, I think. The second half of the album, I like it a lot. I know this is probably where we differ a little bit. I feel like God of Wine is a good closer. It's, thematically
the most Stephan Jenkins song.
It is. But for that reason, it's a good closer for this album. If you can make it through the first 50 minutes, Motorcycle Drive-By might be my favorite of the non-singles on the album. It's a really good song. So that one was Stephan Jenkins thought he was dating a girl and was
it not a single?
I don't think so.
Huh. Because I knew that song then. I'm surprised. Maybe it was just another Third Eye Blind song that was kind of around, but
yeah, or it was like a non-charting single.
Yeah, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't listed on the
And
singles.
I don't know why I know that song so well.
It's really good. Maybe that's why.
That's true. It is a really great song.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Just it's literally about just driving by a girl's apartment on your motorcycle and being sad that you thought she was your girlfriend and she's not. Fits right in with almost all the episodes we've done to this point. I actually think that song is a good explanation of why Third Eye Blind has sometimes popped up on these like emo retrospectives. That is the emo track on the album. It almost sounds a little pre-Dashboard.
It's summertime and the wind is blowing outside in Lower Chelsea, and I don't know what I'm doing in this city. The sun is always in my eyes. It crashes through the windows and I'm sleeping on the couch. When I came to visit you, that's when I knew that I could never have you. I knew that before you did. Still I'm the one who's stupid. And there's this burning like there's always been. I've never been so alone. And I've never been so alive. And there's this burning, just like there's always been. starts to rain, I paddle out on the water alone. Taste the salt and taste the pain, I'm not thinking of you again. Summer dies and swells rise, the sun goes down in my eyes. See this rolling wave, darkly coming to take me home. And I've never been so alone. And I've never been so alive.
All right, so obviously with 5 singles, this album was a pretty huge success, especially through the lens of it being their debut. It hit number 25 on the US Billboard charts. It spent 106 weeks on the charts.
Wow.
Over 2 years on the chart. This is to my point about releasing 2 singles a year apart. Maybe there's something to that at the time.
106 weeks.
106 weeks on the chart. 3.5 million in sales. It is 6 times platinum worldwide. 3 of those singles reached the top 10, Semi-Charmed Life, Jumper, and How's It Going to Be? Semi-Charmed Life hit number 1 on the US pop and alternative charts and was number 4 on the Hot 100. It was also on Big Shiny Tunes too.
It was. Never chopped the countdown though. That's crazy.
Ultimate honor being on Big Shiny Tunes 2 or 3.
Okay, as long as you put 3 in there. I believe How It's Going to Be is on 3.
Jumper hit number 2 on the US pop charts. Semi-Charmed Life also won them a Billboard Award for Modern Rock Track of the Year. Jenkins and Cadigan won California Music Award for Outstanding Songwriters that year. Reflecting on the album now, in The Observer in 2017, Jenkins said, quote, "I really only have one kind of revelation, and I'm afraid that it might sound kind of simplistic. So much of that first record for me just came out of always feeling so on the outside, being a misfit, and it really took me years to realize that I was the inside. I was the scene. I realized that wasn't necessary at all. There's only feeling whole within yourself. There's really no exterior place of belonging. That's it." That is for a guy who also claimed to be punk rock, that is an interesting revelation.
That's more self-awareness than I expect from him.
Yeah. The whole, like, I can't be an outsider. We're an industry band.
Yeah.
And, I grew up in California and I'm
and
a
like they are
white guy.
They're like shiny mainstream rock. And there's not like, I'm not saying there's a problem with that, but they absolutely are. There's nothing transgressive about Third Eye Blind.
So they recently released an album called Screamer in 2019. And in that album review, Pitchfork said, and quote, "In pop punk and emo circles, Third Eye Blind's 1997 self-titled debut is treated with an affection reserved for Weezer's Blue Album and the Violent Femmes debut. Nervy, warts and all depictions of adolescent alienation." Here I thought I was the only one with these fond memories of Third Eye Blind. And, I don't know that it's in quite the same esteem as the Blue Album and Violent Femmes.
It's so funny to me how this is a bit of a tangent, I guess, but
Sure.
like Pitchfork's as their staff becomes, us basically, how their attitudes towards music like this has gone from they literally called Asian Man Records the worst company on the planet in an Alkaline Trio review in the 90s. And then said, we know that like Monsanto and chemical companies exist, but Asian Man Records puts out these albums. And now it's like, we're going to look back fondly on Third Eye Blind. And I don't know, I find it funny.
Yeah.
It's like we all grow up and stop being angry about music or something.
Yeah. You get
Or
out of
nostalgia
get out of your own ass a little bit.
Nostalgia rules all.
It's true. Third Eye Blind did not carry that success over a lot, though. And that nostalgia only had so much equity within the band. They released Blue in 1999, which was not as successful, although Never Let You Go charted, and they had 4 singles off that album, including Deep Inside of You. Sold 1.25 million copies.
Never Let You Go is a great song.
Yeah. Also not a bad follow-up for, hey, this didn't do as good as the debut.
Yeah.
1.25 million.
It's crazy what album sales used to be.
Shortly after Blue, Cadigan was fired from the band. Now, this is where I'm trying to piece together details from Jenkins interviews, Cadigan interviews, and court documents. The band alleged that Cadigan was fired because he refused to sign a deal that would have got the band an advance for an EP and to start an Elektra imprint. Allegedly, the band just slid the bill for the hotel room under his door, replaced him, and went off and performed on The Tonight Show without him. That was how they told him he was out. Cadigan filed a wrongful termination suit seeking not only for the wrongful termination, but songwriting, producing, and record royalties. He claimed that $500,000 was being withheld from him. Jenkins and Cadigan, according to Cadigan, had an oral agreement of split ownership when they began the band. But Jenkins had established Third Eye Blind entities and an incorporation behind his back with 100% of the shares in his own name. Again, allegedly, this verbal agreement was there. It's settled out of court in 2002. So there's not complete clarity on this. The terms of the settlement were undisclosed. However, Cadogan sued again in 2011 because royalties were being withheld. A jury ruled with him in the amount of almost $500,000. Created a rift between the remaining band members because they were kind of turned against Cadogan and afterward realized that,
Jenkins had gone behind his back and started an LLC.
Yes, Cadogan sued again in 2018. He claims he never received a 25% cut of a collection they released on Rhino Records, which included Cadogan written tracks, managed to get the copyright to the songs that he owns. So it sounds like from the news reports at the time of the lawsuit, it sounds like he's got pretty good standing to get a share of that. Other band members over time testified against Jenkins. There was a former manager who Jenkins wanted the rest of the bandmates to sue, and then him and that manager ended up suing each other. And the manager called him self-involved and narcissistic. A subsequent manager called him an asshole. Tony Fredinelli eventually was frozen out of the band. He was one of the ones who testified in the whole Cadogan thing. He won a court case for his own suit for almost $500,000. So the band at this point,
is there anyone left in this band from the gang other than Stephan Jenkins, or they all sued him at this now?
The drummer Brad Hargraves joined in '95, so he was not a part of the founding two, but by the time he's still there from the self-titled.
Okay.
Now,
everyone else has sued Stephan Jenkins.
A crew of the original and former Third Eye Blind members played a show together in 2017 under the name XEB instead of 3EB. Man, all told, Jenkins really seems like a piece of work here. There was a 2017 headline that said, "Here's your chance to enjoy Third Eye Blind without having to deal with Stephan Jenkins," talking about that XEB show. Smash Mouth does not like Third Eye Blind as well. Allegedly, they got into a fight with them in 2014 over something that dates back to 2010. Steve Harwell of Smash Mouth said, and quote, "That guy's a douchebag, you can put that on camera. He's not a good person." The manager, Smash Mouth manager, tried to downplay that as friendly poking fun, but if every band in the industry keeps calling you an asshole.
Yeah, again, it's that Justified quote. You meet an asshole in the morning, you met an asshole, you meet assholes all day, you're the asshole.
Now, there is one part of Jenkins's persona that is a little redeeming beyond just the music. Dude loves trolling Republicans.
Yes, yeah.
So in 2016, Third Eye Blind performed at a Cleveland Republican fundraiser, and while he was on stage, he refused to play all the band's big songs. He said things like, "Raise your hand if you believe in science." Afterward, he told the crowd that they're imposing the exact type of fear that Jumper tries to avoid. And he dug in on social media after as well. This was not the first time either. In a 2015 Rolling Stone feature, he explained climate change to Marco Rubio. He declined a 2012 invitation to play the Republican National Convention. He might not be great, but at least he's using some of that disagreeableness to stick it to.
It just proves that you can agree with the worst people. Everyone's bad.
Everyone's bad, yeah.
Everything and everyone.
That's absolutely right. So Third Eye Blind has 6 albums in total. This year's Screamer was actually pretty good. We're going to contextualize some of the self-titled album after this. So Jake, this was your first time listening to the album front to back in like 15 years.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
I didn't like it as much as I expected to, I think. I think that based on the 5 singles, which I know and think are good, not good, I thought it was going to be like I think I went in expecting to like rediscover an album I thought I didn't know about, like, and be like, wow, I fucking love this. I'm going to be a huge Third Eye Blind fan. I like it. I think it's good. I don't think it's great. I don't think I would put it up there with some of the like forgotten 90s gems or not forgotten 90s gems.
It's not Where Have All the Merrymakers Gone.
It's not, but nothing is. But
I feel like you listen to this whole album with that in your head. It's like, it can't be better than Harvey Danger.
I definitely thought it was going to be a similar experience, but I don't know. I think it was I think it's too long, first of all.
That is
And
fair.
not even necessarily the album itself. Like, I don't think there's too many tracks, but the songs themselves, as I said earlier, they all contain like one bridge too many, if you know what I mean, or one verse too many. I also feel like the back half of the album really bleeds into itself. Like, because they're all sort of slower jams, and they're not bad songs by any means, but like right now, other than Motorcycle Drive-By, I'm trying to like recall any of those songs in my brain. And I listened to it literally yesterday, and it's just not, it's all how it's going to be instead. I don't know. I see why it was popular. That's what I would say. And I don't mean that as a negative.
No, popular songs are usually popular for a reason.
I think, but I can't get how 90s it is. I can't get past that. And I do mean that as a negative only in the sense of that I think because we grew up in that time, that's such a rooted feeling of that Goo Goo Dolls, Gin Blossoms, whatever you want to call it, genre. Then just like, oh, this is adult contemporary. And it's good adult contemporary, but it's fully adult contemporary. So I don't know. I just, I don't know how I feel about this. I'm kind of torn on it, as you can probably tell.
Yeah. Do you see my point about, not even my point, because it's come up, like I said, on the Reddits and in some retrospectives of how some of these songs may have been not gateway songs, but like a pop punk emo precursor.
Yeah.
Even though the sound isn't the same, you can kind of see how there's a pretty logical transition from this kind of alternative and what started getting popular in the early to mid 2000s.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it briefly when we were talking Motorcycle Drive-By. The connection in sound to Dashboard especially is all over this. I think that Chris Carrabba definitely listened to this album and definitely owned this album. And I think that, I don't know if I would go as far to say that it's a gateway necessarily, or that it's even in, I think I understand why the guy on our emo got mad at people calling this emo, but like Motorcycle Drive-By could fit in any early 2000s emo record.
Yeah.
Seamlessly.
Have you looked at the sidebar of the emo subreddit before?
No.
Do that after.
Okay.
They are very strict about what is and isn't. Like, they would be mad at us for some of the things we've said are emo adjacent.
Perfect.
Over the
That's
course
exactly
of the
what
first
emo needs more. I'm assuming white men gatekeeping it.
Yes.
Gatekeeping
it from other white men.
Yeah.
Let's be real. We're not.
That's true.
We're not being marginalized here for our emo takes.
Good point. No, I think I absolutely I see why this album, like we were saying with like this quote unquote, this emo night crowd. I see why. I think you could pop any of these songs on an emo night playlist and no one would be like, what the fuck? Like, be like, oh yeah, of course.
You could also pop all of these songs on a soundtrack.
Or how about every soundtrack?
Third Eye Blind has 44 IMDb credits when I checked this week. Not even included among those credits is maybe the goofiest use of one of these songs. In the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey. Have you ever seen that movie?
No, I think you sent me a list. There's a list here of all these soundtracks. Yes Man's the only one of these I have not seen.
So in Yes Man, the story is basically that Jim Carrey is...
Isn't it Liar Liar but with saying yes?
Kind of. He's just like... He's like a bit of a shut-in. He doesn't do anything. Bradley Cooper's his best friend and like he misses Bradley Cooper's like engagement party because he's just so antisocial and won't do anything. And then he goes to this like seminar about saying yes more, and he gets obsessed with just saying yes, and he ends up dating Zooey Deschanel. And anyway, at one of the pivotal scenes, there is someone who's like out on a ledge. I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name, Luis something. He's the guy that they have a statue of him in Community.
Luis Guzman.
There you go. Luis Guzman is out on a ledge, and Jim Carrey runs upstairs, grabs the guy's acoustic guitar, and starts singing Jumper to him.
My man, hello?
Don't do it! I'm coming! Patience is a virtue!
What the hell you doing in there?
Wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. You could cut ties with all the lies that you've been living in. And if you never want to see me again, I would understand. I would understand.
Weird use of that song. That is not among the
That is
44.
a specific joke.
Yes.
Wow.
That is among the 44 IMDb credits, which also include TV shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Will and Grace, and Smallville. I picked...
could not pick a more Third Eye Blind show than Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes. Talk about era specific. Yeah. I sent you 10 movies off of this IMDb list. We won't get into too much detail, but I picked what I think were the 10 best or most well-known movies that Third Eye Blind tracks from this album appeared in. Here's the list. I will give them to you in the order that I like these movies.
Okay.
And then you can tell me where I'm wrong. Number 1 would be Can't Hardly Wait, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's in both American Pie and American Reunion. I've lumped those together because when you're talking American Pie soundtracks, it's all one thing. Dirty Work, the old Norm Macdonald movie, which is pretty funny. Maybe doesn't hold up super well if I watched it back
does
now.
not.
Varsity Blues, Coyote Ugly, Wild Things, 30 Minutes or Less, Yes Man, Game Night, and Me, Myself, and Irene.
So you want me to put my order for this?
I would just like you to tell me, you don't have to give me all 10, but what are your favorites from there? Do you hate any of those movies?
I don't, not hate. I definitely, so to your Dirty Work point, some friends and I watched it like 6 or 7 years ago, or rewatched it, I guess. Woof.
Oh boy.
Woof.
I will not rewatch that movie then.
I mean, American Pie is what it is. It's definitely of a time, problems and all. I still like it. I understand the issues with it. Also, the American Pie 2 soundtrack, we will talk one day because it's amazing. Can't Hardly Wait is a movie that I think America, because of our very small age difference, even though it's only a few years, I think American Pie was for my age what Can't Hardly Wait was for yours.
Sure.
Like, I think I just missed. I like Can't Hardly Wait. I've seen it tons of times and I like it. But my like nostalgia goggles for it, I think I have closer to the American Pie movies than I do to Can't Hardly Wait.
Eve 6 didn't die for this.
I love Eve 6. Varsity Blues is perfect, obviously. Wild Things and Coyote Ugly are made for the same purpose. Me, Myself, and Irene, I remember really liking, but I also haven't watched.
I hated it so much.
I really liked it when it came out. I'm sure it doesn't hold up. I'm sure there's nothing in that movie that isn't terrible.
I don't like the like over the top comedy. Like I've always liked Will Ferrell less than everyone else likes Will Ferrell. So Jim Carrey being unleashed to do just like the absolute worst Jim Carrey impulses.
Yeah, I get that.
Also, Jim Carrey must just be a huge Third Eye Blind fan.
I guess. Which again, era makes sense. 30 Minutes or Less is a really weird movie because it's based off a really fucked up true story. I don't know if you know the actual
I did
story.
not know that.
There's a documentary on Netflix. I think it's called Evil Genius. That's about this story. It's really good. Essentially, the story was this guy got manipulated by, I forget if it was one woman or a group of people, basically to have a bomb strapped to his neck and go rob a bank. And then, but with the idea that the bomb wasn't real or wasn't going to go off, it was real. He was killed. While like the police were surrounding him. It's an insane story, really dark.
And they just did a stoner comedy about it.
Which is odd. Because it's a really tragic, messed up story. And they made a Jesse Eisenberg.
McBride in that movie?
I think, Jesse Eisenberg. Is Nick Swardsden the other villain in it?
Yeah, Dylan's saying yes.
Yeah,
Aziz is in it, right?
Aziz is in it, yeah. It's the movie is definitely fine.
Yeah.
I just think it's weird they took this really fucked up story. Yeah. The movie I will say that I actually do think is the best movie on this list is Game Night, because Game Night whips ass.
My main point about Game Night is that because those are people in their late 30s to early 40s, and that movie came out recently, Can't Hardly Wait being on that soundtrack fits almost as perfectly as it does on like Can't Hardly Wait and American Pie being teen songs then.
Completely.
It's like, oh, these people are trying to fight off being boring old people.
But that movie rules and everyone should see Game Night.
All right. Of these soundtrack songs or of another song on the album, we got to pick one for the mixtape.
So, okay, I've been thinking about this mixtape a lot this week because we kind of had this debate a little bit last week.
Right. Is it the best song or is it the song that people maybe haven't heard or is it our favorite that's not a single?
Exactly.
There's a lot of ways to go with it.
If we're going with like my favorite song on this album, it's probably How It's Going to Be Your Graduate. I'm kind of indifferent to which one because I like them both. But at the same token, how do you not pick Semi-Charmed Life?
Right. But we didn't pick Sugar We're Going Down for Fall Out Boy.
That's true.
We decided that everyone would know Sugar We're Going Down. If you're making a mixtape for someone, why would you give them the track?
All right, so then I leave this is your album. I leave the choice to you.
I will. Motorcycle Drive-By is the one. If I were making this mixtape for someone, that is the song that I would put on there. I think because you want to expand someone's horizons a little bit. They know the Third Eye Blind singles. You want to give them a little something else. And Graduate might qualify because it was, I think, the least known of the singles.
Yeah.
Also, it's just a kick-ass rock song, but I'm going to go with Motorcycle Drive-By.
Hell yeah.
Everyone's heard the Third Eye Blind singles. You might not realize there's a good song, like a good emo song on the back half of that album.
Hell yeah. Motorcycle Drive-By it is.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Oh, hey, please try the fish.